Disclaimer: these stories are copyrighted by the users I'll be naming and the website yourghoststories.com. I do not own any of the rights to these stories, and this video is purely for entertainment purposes. I also do not own the music. This is credited to YouTuber Miu. Check them and the original website, both are must read and listen. Second disclaimer: the stories you'll be hearing are paranormal, which means they talk about ghosts, spiritual encounters, possessions, hauntings, etc., etc. If you do not believe in this, so be it. I myself am skeptical, but I'm a partial believer. Only thing I ask is that you are respectful to people's beliefs in the comment section, or I'll find a way to haunt you. Also, be aware that I'm Dutch, so I might fuck up pronunciations and the like. Please forgive me. Enjoy the video. A Night at the Lamp Mansion by MS Megan 2. The story takes place in Illinois. I spent a memorable night at the Lamp Mansion with my cousin Cindy. It was memorable for me because of the activity. Memorable for Cindy because it firmly cemented in her mind that she would never return. We stayed in the Charles Lamp suite. Charles was the last of the Lamp family to take his own life in the mansion. Stories have circulated that he went downstairs and shot his dog, then returned to his bedroom to shoot himself. This is not true. He shot himself in the morning on his bed. He was the only member of the Lamp family to leave a note, and the fourth to commit suicide. 3 in the mansion and a sister in her home in another St. Louis neighborhood. Charles stated that when found, blame no one but me. He left word that his last remaining brother, Edwin, was to have his body taken immediately without any further preparation and have it cremated and to bury the ashes on his farm in St. Louis County. The burial spot of Charles Lamp's ashes will never be known. After the death of Edwin, all Lamp papers were burned along with valuable artwork and other items as requested by Edwin of his groundskeeper. The night we stayed in Charles' suite, there was a party in the outside gazebo that lasted until around midnight. All other suites were occupied for the night, so any investigation we might be able to do was limited. We did wander about the house and took some photographs, did a little EVP work and took some video film. There was nothing remarkable. At around 1 AM, we decided to call it a night. I set up my video camcorder, which is not equipped with night vision, on a small table at the entrance to the room, pointing it towards the corner where there was a little light coming in through the window from outside. The guest table was set up in this corner and it included a coffee maker, muffins and an ice bucket filled with ice, wine and orange juice. My reason for setting up the camera was to use it to record audio, as my tape recorder would make a rather loud click when the tape was finished, and the camcorder would simply shut down after 2 hours. I did not expect any video to be useful. I was sleeping peacefully for about an hour, but awoke when my cousin began to move around. She was hot in the room and finding it difficult to sleep. We spoke for a few seconds and I drifted back off, but not for long. Almost immediately I was totally awakened by the sound of the ice in our ice bucket being literally tossed into the sink in the room. It was very loud. I asked Cindy, "What was that?" She replied, "I think it was the ice." We could both see the bucket sitting on the table and knew it had not moved, but there was no mistaking the sound we heard. When I reviewed the 2 hours of videotape the next day, I noticed that the little light that came in through the drapes began to distort after a while. The camcorder self-focuses and I assumed it was trying to do just that. Gradually it began to get more and more distorted. I continued to watch it and reached a point in the tape where Cindy and I awoke just before the sound of the ice. There it was, on the tape, the recording of the ice being thrown into the sink. I was delighted to have caught it on tape. It was loud and sounded exactly as it had the night before. I recorded a copy of that portion of the tape onto DVD to keep it safe. It was a very exciting night and a very good catch for me. I since returned to Lamp and spent an hour closed up in Charles' room alone, attempting to record EVPs through asking questions, but was unable to get a response. I will not give up. I continue to visit Lamp and will continue to try to contact Charles Lamp every chance I get. I recommend anyone who can visit this top Haunted America site to go. The Clock is Off by Alison Beckert, 23. This story takes place in United States, Arizona. About 3 months ago, my boss's mother passed away. She was living in a house adjoined to his. I live in the same neighborhood and we work closely at his office. His is a small business and I love working there. Office is a remodeled house that now has my small desk area, a conference room, 2 offices and a storage room. Workroom, break room and copy room. Much of the time I'm alone in the whole house with enough to keep me busy. I keep thinking I hear voices around, but there's too much that could be causing that naturally that I just dismiss it. We're right on a busy street and the insulation is absolutely terrible. I could be hearing some kid across the street or the echo of someone's randomly loud radio. No telling, so it could be anything, and I don't give it credence. Debunked, as the saying goes. A few weeks after his mother passed, she was 93, he brought in this old pendulum clock. It can use a cleaning and the pendulum doesn't swing now. It works just fine, just the pendulum is left in for the decoration. It's not an antique or anything, at least that's what he told me when I asked about it. The chimes work fine, it ticks quietly away and the gears are all quiet. The funky thing about it and why he is trying to fix it is that it chimes at the wrong times. It chimes 10 some odd minutes ahead of the time it keeps. I figured, no big deal. This is just a funky broken clock. I never got weird vibes from it except when it chimed, and the chime is creepy just because it's old style and you never know when it's coming. Here's the issue. I only picked up on it in this last week. It only chimes when my boss is in. Now, he doesn't have to wind it, it's battery powered now. The insides were replaced years ago to make it run without winding. I'm in the office from 8:30 to 5, 3 times a week, and I can promise I'd have hit the ceiling if that thing had chimed from his office when I was the only one in. Nothing comes from that clock when he's gone except for the normal ticking. I've even taken a peek at the mechanism, and even when he's gone, the chime is clearly supposed to be on. I've never touched the mechanism, but it does have a little screw you can turn to switch the chime off. It's always on, but it doesn't chime unless my boss is in the office. He's been in 2 days now and I've heard it chime, if you'll excuse the obvious expression, like clockwork once he comes in. I've tried to catch him working on it, but it's never even been moved. The Thing We Couldnt See by Amber Lastrega. This takes place United States, Iowa. I'd taken Denishka to my mother's for a weekend visit. I'm not sure on the year, but I guess around 1987. Mom lived in Iowa. Denishka and me were visiting from San Francisco. For years I'd promised Denishka I'd someday take her for a trek through my haunted neighborhood. This particular time she held me to it. We began by heading north up Mom Street, which meant we were heading up a rather steep hill. At the top of the hill we crossed to the opposite side of the road, then entered the yard. It was quite dark. As I groped to find familiar paths from my childhood, we stepped over plant material that felt spongy, and I remember thinking things had changed since last I'd made the neighborhood rounds. The yards there in the old neighborhood are massive, with backyards the size of football fields or better. Finally we got, trespassed to the back of said property, and there found a lovely little bridge crossing a small creek. Then a short jaunt, and we were on another path that led through the next yard, then onto the street north of Mom's. We headed west, past dark homes resting in ample yards, towards the S-curve in the road. At the lower half of the S, towards the north, was the house with the totem pole. Ah, the totem pole. Let me tell you, this thing is weird. It doesn't stand upright, but is instead curved like a huge donut sunk half in the ground. It felt cold, like ceramic or plaster, but I now guess its composition to be of fiberglass. It was decorated, I use the term loosely, with an array of oddities. A huge ear, about 1 meter in length, the face of a king of a deck of cards, unsure which suit, a large brain, perhaps 5 times the human brain size, mushrooms. Gosh, I can't remember it all. The thing looked like an acid trip realized in an incredibly weird sculpture. I'll try to get down there this summer and take photos, assuming it's still there. We stayed for just a short time. I was leery of the large dog I knew to have patrolled the property some time before. Though it was creepy, we hadn't yet felt haunted. We made off for the church grounds. Once there, we lay down in the parking lot to catch a glimpse of the expanse of the stars above. That parking lot, historically, was always where I would acquire, if you will, the littles. The little folk who then would always follow myself and my guest on the remainder of our explore. More stories for another time? That night though, we thought we'd heard the littles' telltale whispers and giggles. Something else seemed to pervade. Not a sound, but a sense of darkness. No, worse. It felt malignant, vile, evil. Danishka and me sat bolt upright and instinctively began to scoot slowly so our backs were together as there we sat. The little whispers and giggles were stifled as birds and crickets before a storm. The silence was obvious and unnerving. We moved to stand and a growl met us. Though let me explain, it was less a sound than a feeling. Make sense? We decided we should flee, and I decided to cut through the Robinsons, a densely wooded yard that opens to a field which leads back to Mom Street. The growl moved in front of us. Mind you, I could physically see nothing, but the presence was unmistakable. I gently touched Danishka on the shoulder, indicating the direction of our next move with a nod of my head. But I didn't stray my eyes from the spot my senses told me was occupied by the thing. Suddenly I burst off towards the road, not even wasting time to go through the Robinsons. Instead we went through the Kuskis yard, long as the other yards but not as densely treed. As we moved towards the back, perhaps 100 feet from the house in the side yard, the thing tried to get in front of us. By now it was making such a racket I thought I'd go mad. I can tell you now the sounds, I can make my mind remember them. In fact, I wasn't sure at all if the sounds were in my head only and not out of it. Then I noticed from the corner of my eye that lights had flickered on in the Kuski's house and heads could be seen peering out towards us through assorted windows. Somehow knowing that others could hear or sense the thing terrified me even more. I ducked down to hide next to a truck topper, Sans truck, which had tall grasses all around it where the lawnmower couldn't reach. Danishka dropped to her knees next to me, gasping. "What is that?" she screamed in a whisper. For a moment I didn't feel the thing impeding our path. I took the moment to bolt. I hate to say it, but I was literally out to save myself, not even stopping for a millisecond to check that Danishka was surviving. I got to the gate that separated the Kuski's yard from Mom's neighbor across the street's yard. I was freaking out and not having an easy time with the latch when again the thing loudly made its presence known. Finally the gate was open and we were sprinting across the expansive lawn towards the driveway. A long and winding drive. The formal garden surrounding the house is separated from the front by a long line of trees which run parallel with the creek, mentioned earlier in my story. As we approached that line of trees running so fast nary a step touched the ground, we awoke what sounded like hundreds of sleeping birds who all at once fled from the trees, screeching and making a horrid sound. Cacophonous. Then I wasn't sure if it were birds I heard, or the thing which pursued us, or both. I should mention here, outside of abject fear, there also seemed to be some weird time-space thing happening. I can't explain or describe it, everything just felt twisted and not real. Perhaps it was just terror. Finally, out of the trees and making our way towards the front fence/gate, imposing, gothic-looking black iron jobby that was closed. We didn't break step until we hit the gate and made the climb over. I felt as the men in the Omen who were running from the evil dogs in the cemetery and had a terrible thought I'd impale myself. I managed not to. We ran across the street towards the warm glow of the lights lining my mother's front walk, then could detect the comforting sound of my dog Benji barking in the backyard. We ran up the drive and crashed through the back gate to collapse on lawn chairs, panting and laughing, almost crying, and trying to get a word out. As we got our thoughts, translate as shit, together, and could finally talk, we sat and related in hushed voices what each the other had felt and seen, etc. As we did so, we could hear that my horses in the pasture behind Mom's house had come up to the fence, which kept them out of the backyard proper. My dog trotted down the stone path to say hi to them, and we followed. Eventually we stood at the fence, petting and cooing to the animals. Before me was Zeus, our largest stallion. I remember now, hindsight, that he was acting odd. They all were. Skittish. But at the time I guess I was trying to make things as normal as possible. And I shook it off. Presently, Zeus took a long step back, an awkward movement, because he did so with only one leg. He then looked straight at me, into my eyes, don't know, too dark, and commenced to urinating a long and drawn out piss. His stance was, how shall I say, almost threatening, like he was a bull preparing to charge. As Danishka and me and poor Benji were witnessing all this, Thing dropped down on us from above. There are no trees directly above, just an old-fashioned type electrical line. It dropped to the ground directly between Zeus and me, but on my side of the fence. When I say it dropped, I mean we could hear it. Feel the thud reverberate through the ground at our feet. We were all standing very close, within a 3 to 4 foot circle. Again, let me remind you, I could physically see nothing, but my brain attempted to create a mass in the general vicinity of the thing. Still, I seriously don't remember physically seeing anything. Anyway, the horses, including Zeus, erupted into wild neighing, bucking and kicking, then scattered as if wolves were after them. Absolutely speechless. I looked at Danishka, my mind groping for any sort of reasoning. Benji broke me off my reverie, though I doubt it lasted more than a few seconds. Benji was barking and making for the house. Again, we followed him. The flight was excruciating. For a moment I could not see the house nor back porch, our supposed safety. Instead, I saw myself from behind, running in panic as though I saw through its eyes. We made it to the porch. Benji was already inside via his own doggy passage through the back door. I was tempted to jump through it myself, but my higher logic convinced me to use the doorknob instead. Danishka and me didn't stop until we'd run through the front of the house, to the front and formal living room, used only when Mom has guests. Once there, we were oddly calmed, collected, moving pointedly. I went to the secretary in the corner and moved a pen and paper. Danishka switched on the stereo and retrieved a bottle of Merlot from the wine cabinet. I sat on the sofa, pen in hand, with a mind to write of our experience. Danishka sat on the floor near the serving coffee table and poured us both a glass of wine. Though out of breath, we refused to show it. We were fine. My cats, one by one, began to saunter into the room, noticing that we were out of sorts, but not wanting us to think they cared enough to show any concern. Just when everything was beginning to feel alright, a huge cat fight erupted under the sofa upon which I sat. I mean, you could see fur flying out from below, and of course you know how awful is that sound. There was no doubt in my mind, at the time at least, my cats were fighting the thing right under my caboose. Now, that's where the story ends. I know Danishka and me took that bottle of wine to my bedroom, where we sat with every single light on, including closet lights. We did not speak further of the incident that night. We simply waited for the sun, and thankfully the wait was uneventful. I did eventually finish penning the whole story, by hand, somewhere in the region of 20 pages front and back. I held on to it for many years too. Though now, since I bought my house in 98's August, I have been unable to locate the sheets. Alas, I've done my best in this retelling. Haunting After Using a Ouija Board by Ryan Robinson. This story takes place in the United States, Washington. I believe my house is haunted. Every night when I am the only one awake, I hear a faint scream coming from the kitchen/dining room area. Then I hear a thud and a person chanting the name of a demon I happen to be somewhat familiar with. I have dreams of him almost every night. Choo-choo Lane, at least I think that's how you spell it. Also in my garage area there is something in there that wants me as well. Now, my dad is a spiritual person who knows a lot about all these things, and whatever is in the garage is afraid of him, but it wants me. And the exorcism, for lack of a better word, my dad told me to use, doesn't work. I use it in the garage and the garage freaks out. It starts laughing so faintly that it's hard to hear it. If it helps any, I was using a Ouija board about 1 or 2 days before all of this happened. It said I was in danger of death, but since my dad started showing up more often, the spirits have been backing down. If anyone can offer any form of helpful advice, it is welcome. Now, this is a warning you are gonna hear a lot whenever I'm gonna read off a story or have read off a story that has to do with Ouija boards and seances/sessions that were done with Ouija boards. Do not mess with these things. Do not do these sessions on your own, as they could be actually dangerous. I don't care if you believe or not, these things can cause you a lot of harm if these sessions are done without any kind of research. Something could attach to you and cause harm to you, your family, and your loved ones. So, one last time, do not do a Ouija board session alone for the love of all that is holy. That is all. Thank you everyone for watching or listening. I'm immensely grateful that the first part was so well received and I loved reading the comments on it. Now, I want to ask something of you. Besides subscribing and smashing that like button. No, I want to ask you that if you have any sort of paranormal experiences or stories and you'd like to share them, you can feel totally free to DM them to me either on Twitter DMs or on Discord or via note on DeviantArt. All links are in the description. I would love to share your stories if you permit me to do so, either anonymous or credited. Either way is good for me. Hopefully I'll hear from you guys soon. And if not, see you next video.